Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah, live around the world on the interwebs at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, and welcome to Thursday. How did we get here already? It's just been one of those hucklebuck weeks, man. I tell you what, it's kind of crazy. We're ready to go. We're continuing on our candidate interview jag. It's going to be doing this all the way through. I mean, I would say all the way through the primary, although I guess it really doesn't matter for most elections, most races out there, because most of the races have less than 4 people in them. So it's kind of more of a, I don't know, what do we call it? An opinion poll, a straw poll, more than anything else. But it's good to get the candidates on record to find out where they're at, what their positions are, what their thoughts are on the state of the state and the state of state government. Say that 6 times fast. It's going to be a fun time, and we're going to continue our discussions today. We're going to be joined here in hour 1 by Lee Ellis, who is a brand spanking new candidate for House District 9, which is the Girdwood area. That's a seat that was formerly held by Laddie Shaw, and now has 4 different candidates running in that for that seat. We'll get his take on what he sees in the state, what his vision is for it, what he plans on doing, and his his priorities as we get ready to jump into it. Then in hour 2, we're going to be talking, this should be a different one for us specifically, because we're going to be talking to Representative Alyse Galvin, who is the current representative for House District 14. And she only has one opponent, and they're both Alyse is an independent, but she caucuses with the Democrats. So, it's independent. So it's 2 Democrats in that seat, anyway, it's going to be an interesting conversation. I kind of look forward to it. I mean, it's ironic that it seems like I only get to talk to more progressive candidates during the election cycle. That's the only time that they kind of really want to talk to me. But I'm never mean or anything. I think it's always interesting to get that alternative point of view, even if you disagree with it, just to kind of figure out where people are coming from. It should be fun stuff. So, independent, you'll keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. I've kind of got that feeling, my brother. I kind of feel that for sure. All right. Let's get going on, shall we? Shall we get our groove on here? We're ready to go. I see that Lee Ellis is hanging out in the green room. He's eating all of my virtual donuts. Luckily, there's no calories in virtual donuts. Just save me 1 or 2 if you would there, please. Let's get into it there, shall we? And jump into it. Lee Ellis, candidate for House District 9, our guest this morning as we keep going on, and he joins us right now. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm excellent. How are you doing this morning, Michael?
Good. Well, that's a very Alaska background. For those of you on the radio who can't see, I see all the log chinking behind you in like a log cabin somewhere. Lee, welcome to the program. Thanks for coming in on this, beautiful rainy Thursday here. For folks who don't know you, and, I think we've got a lot of kind of brand new faces in some of these races, especially House District 9. Lee, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where you are, who you are, where you came from, and we'll just get started. We'll get started right there. Oh, and how far? I know it encompasses Girdwood, but you got a pretty chonky area there for your district. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, thank you. So I am Lee Ellis. I am a Girdwood resident. I run a brewery in Anchorage called Midnight Sun Brewing Company. And I'm also the president of the Brewers Guild of Alaska, which is a trade association that represents breweries, wineries, and distilleries across the state. So I've spent the last 6 years working on comprehensive title reform for alcohol laws and worked under all the regulations that can go along with that. So have spent a ton of time working on legislation, a lot of time working in the Capitol, working with legislators, lobbyists, executive branch, regulators, all that kind of stuff. So I decided that when I found out that Representative Shaw was going to be retiring, that I would consider making a run. Business is an important thing to me, and we've seen businesses kind of stagnate the last 8 years in the state, and I just have had enough of it, and I feel that there's some work the government could be doing to help enhance our economy, and I just don't feel like it was getting done in Juneau. So I decided that I would go to Juneau instead of enjoying wonderful winters in Girdwood, which I still wonder if that's a good idea.
That was going to be my next question. First and foremost is, Lee, first and foremost, I got to tell people I feel a kinship, first of all, because he's a brewer, and Midnight Sun, I'm a huge fan.
Thank you.
And, I ironically, we've never met before. We've never talked before, but I have, I voice a lot of commercials for Midnight Sun intentionally because I love the brewery there. So we get that done. But that leads me to my next question. What you just said is, Lee, what exactly did you lose your damn mind? I mean, what was it? I mean, was there a single thing, or was it cumulative, or was it just like, network where I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore? I mean, what was it that caused you to do this? Because obviously, as a business owner, you're super busy. I mean, you're really busy. And this is not somebody who's retired, taking a big pension, independently wealthy. This is a big deal. So what made you do it? What was the one thing, or was it a combination of things?
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, for anybody out there considering owning a brewery, it is probably the worst pathway to independent wealth. So it's a labor of love. It's not a pathway you get into to become rich and famous and have a company jet. But there's plenty of beer, which is awesome.
Right.
No,
There's
I mean, that's
benefits.
Yeah, the fringe benefits are great. I have my career because I love what I do. I love employing people. I love working with folks. I love making a product that is a reward to people after a long day of work. I spent the last 12 years working as a ski patroller at Alyeska. I originally came to Alaska in 2007 to be what was called a Jesuit volunteer. And I worked at Beans Cafe in Anchorage, working with the homeless population of Anchorage for a year. Served in the Marine Corps. I think I just have this weird, sick addiction to doing good things for my community, and I think
you could have stopped it.
Yeah.
We could have stopped. Yeah, I got a box of crayons around here somewhere. We'll figure it out. Hoorah, brother! Hoorah!
Not everybody gets that crayon joke, and I say it once in a while at a door, and usually the guys in the Navy get it. Yeah. But no, I just I drive my wife nuts, I think, a little bit, because I'm doing way more than I should be or have to be. But I love this state, I love this country, and it doesn't get better if we just sit and watch it. The easy thing to do is to complain. The easy thing to do is to say I voted and nothing happened. But some of us have got to step up and do the hard thing. And I'm a month into the millennial generation, and it's time for our generation to step up and start taking the reins and deciding what the future is going to look like. And this is what it looks like, and it's just as crazy as you think it is. So
all it takes is for good men to do nothing, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. That's Sometimes you got to step up. It may be a painful lesson, but sometimes you still have to step up and do it. And of course, being a Marine, you're no stranger to doing things the hard way. So it's all
yeah,
good.
I could have joined the Air Force, or,
Yeah.
or
Oh,
something,
man.
something sensible with
Yeah.
a career pathward afterwards.
Just another Chair Force volunteer. All right, let's continue on here with some of the big issues. From your perspective, I don't want to drive the bus in that, so I'm going to let you lay out for me what you think are going to be the big issues facing the state. And if you are elected, what is going to be your target? What are you going to be focused on in this first session as a freshman coming in there and everything else? What do you want to try and accomplish?
I think that the most pressing issue facing the state right now, or especially the rail belt, is energy security. I running a business that requires heavily on natural gas to make our products, living in a log home that requires natural gas to be heated, and recognizing that most of my neighbors are in the same boat. That's something that needs to be addressed. I think 15 years of recognizing that we are running towards an energy cliff, if you will, and having not addressed that, I think is far and away the most pressing issue. We're probably going to have to get into importing LNG because we haven't taken the steps to secure a better energy future for the state, but we need to keep working towards developing our resources and getting energy supply. There's no growing the economy if you can't power it. So that's just a minimum. That's like if we didn't have water. It's like if we were in California, we kept building neighborhoods without water. That's insane. Yeah. So that's got to be addressed immediately.
Energy is an interesting discussion because what I've seen so far, because I agree with you, I think eventually, I said even in a short term, and by short term, I mean a 10-year period, I think imports are probably going to be the solution because we have failed to address a lot of this stuff. But part of that is economics, right? I mean, we've got 17 trillion cubic feet of gas on our slope, but the economics to get it somewhere is just not working out. We got the Jones Act hindering us. Otherwise, we could tanker it from one side of the state to the other, but we can't. Pipeline's going to be billions of dollars. That is uneconomical. So I guess, we do have a Marathon plant down on Nikiski that could be reversed to have an import. It's further ahead than some kind of Point Mac solution, which they don't even have permits, let alone breaking ground. So I think that importing is probably going to be a choice, but who pays in your mind for this down the road? I mean, we've seen a lot of talk about royalty relief. We've seen a lot of talk about some of these other things. And yet I've also had people reach out to me who've worked for some of these companies that work in the Cook Inlet to say, well, they've capped a lot of wells. There's a lot of wells out there that could be used. The question is it a false crisis because we're feeling some pressure? Or is it just a push to try and get a royalty-free kind of thing? I mean, who pays for this in the long run, in your mind, Lee?
Well, the ratepayer. I mean, that's no matter which way you cut it, the customers and residents in the South Central area are going to be paying for this. And if they have to raise prices in order to open those wells up and get them going, so you've got the appropriate economies of scale, then that's what they're going to do. Looking at the long term, we've got gas stranded on the North Slope. And I think we've looked at some plans for that. We've looked at an export line, and we've always imagined that we're going to export that gas. But I think in reality, the price of gas is is not going up in the next decade. And I'm always a big fan of the idea that, if it's cheap now, import, and when it gets expensive, let's start exporting, because, that's just a good economic idea to sell your products at a much higher price than you bought them at.
Right.
But
how about working ahead? How about working ahead as well? I mean, if we're going to import, shouldn't we also have a parallel where we're building out something for export? Because that's not going to happen overnight, right? I mean, that's a 10-year cycle, at least. So if we do start importing, shouldn't we also have some kind of parallel track where we're slowly building out the export opportunities as well? I mean, shouldn't that be part of the process?
Right. And I got a mechanic up the street that hands you a card, and I love this. You can either have it fast, good, or cheap. Pick any two. So if we take our time and we, develop this getting gas off the North Slope, I think we can do it in a more affordable way. And then, because it is a long-term plan. It is 10 to 20 years down the road. We need to be solving this. And I think that's, again, what motivated me to run, is that, I'm totally invested in the state. I've got every dollar that I've ever had dumped into my home and in my business. And I'm thinking about this on a 30-year timeline. And I wish more legislators would think about it in a 30-year timeline. We get into this issue where folks are down there for 2 years and they want to come back to their district with all these great answers and solutions. But I want to make sure that this state is successful for the next 30, 50, 100 years. So, yeah, I think importing is going to be the answer now. And then we need to start reevaluating what our plan was for that North Slope gas, because that's so much gas. We could literally power the state for well over 100 years. Think about what kind of security that provides.
I would be happy with it. I would be happy with the 10-year plan and forecast.
Well, that's what's disappointing, right? Is that we go, I would be so happy if we had a 10-year plan. And I'm like, I want to focus on a 100-year plan.
Okay, I mean, maybe that's a little ambitious. A 5-year plan. Can I get something more than the next election cycle, which is, it seems to be the current planning that we have right now, if not year to year. Lee Ellis is our guest, Republican candidate, House District 9 in Girdwood. We're going to continue with him here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with more, and Lee Ellis right after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the commercial break right now. Lee Ellis is our guest. Lee, we try and we don't stray too far because we don't want to have to repeat ourselves on the radio, but there's a few follow-up questions on this. I mean, I agree. I mean, first of all, the gas prices, I'm saying crisis in quotes at this point, in the Cook Inlet, affects not just South Central. I mean, because of the intertie, we're talking about, the effects on Kenai and Homer, even the rail and even the intertie up into Fairbanks, because there's some shared power agreements and things like that. So everybody who's essentially on the major road systems through the intertie is going to be affected by this, and it's something that we really have to look at. But I also don't like to put all our eggs in one basket. And I know there's a lot of talk about renewables, which are great, except for that they are they're not sustained power like wind and air, wind and solar and things like that. Hydro, I'm all about. I mean, Hoover Dam's over 100 years old, still providing a significant amount of power to the entire West Coast. We've got other choices. There's been discussions now, and there's actually up in Eielson, they're going to put a micronuclear plant in there. Whether I think it's a battery, I don't think it's an actual plant, but it's a nuclear battery. We should be on the bleeding edge of this stuff. I mean, think about all the communities that could be affected with something like a micronuclear setup or something like that. Are you, what are your thoughts on that kind of split of things, and still relying on obviously natural gas and oil?
Yeah, I think that's, the most important thing to remember is that anytime you're going to start adapting renewables to your grid, you've got to have a baseline energy source, right? So the other thing I also remind people is that, when you think about electrifying our grid with renewables, is that most people, again, heat their house with natural gas. They run their stove with natural gas. They run their water heater with natural gas. So there's a lot of price comparisons about, let's say, putting up a Susitna-Watana Dam versus building a pipeline. And those are good comparisons, but what they don't really take into account is what it's going to cost for every homeowner to switch over to an electric boiler system. What's it going to cost for every homeowner to switch out their stove or switch out their water heater? I haven't seen that cost comparison added into those plans, and I think that's definitely something we need to consider. I think renewables are absolutely totally sensible. I've definitely been a strong advocate of adding renewables to our grid because we have so much natural energy in the state that we can harness. But at the same time, you have a whole system built on natural gas energy. So that has to be a part of it. And that has to be addressed. I definitely want to keep my house above 64 degrees in the wintertime. And I don't have electric power or electric heat to do it.
Yeah.
The wonderful thing is I'm actually married. My wife is the state hydropower coordinator for the Department of Fish and Game. And so she actually works on all the hydropower projects across the state. And so she has a wonderful wealth of information about the potential development of hydropower, what it could be doing. And I think there's a lot of potential for it, especially in rural Alaska. So she works on a lot of these like run of river projects. So a lot of people imagine hydropower as being an impoundment and a dam, but a lot of times all they can do is take off a little bit of water from that river and produce a pretty good amount of energy for smaller communities. So I think that's when I think about renewables, I think the more immediate use for them is to adapt them into rural communities first. When we're looking at powering a small community with diesel fuel that we're flying out or barging out, and, it's costing that community $10 to $12 a gallon just to create electricity with diesel fuel. I think that's something we could do better. And when we talk about, income disparity in rural areas, like energy costs is a huge aspect to that. So I think that's what I'd want to address first with renewables. I think the nuclear thing's awesome. I would love to see that develop, but I think we're still, probably a couple decades away from that being, a reasonable solution. So,
No, I mean, micro hydro is actually a thing, and I think it's something that should be looked at a lot more because, again, it's the consistency that we're looking for of that kind of energy. All right, well, the ding means we're about to rejoin the radio, so we're going to get back into it. Lee Ellis is our guest. Let's get going. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Please share this show wherever you're watching it, Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. Please share it out and get more people involved in the conversation. Let's get going. Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
That's a lie. I'm a perfect angel. Just ask my dad. He's in the chat room. He'll tell you. Wait, don't tell him. Don't tell him. All right, let's continue on. Lee Ellis is our guest candidate for House District 9. Lee has just talked about an hour in this first segment about how his main focus when he gets in there will be the energy situation in the Cook Inlet, which is important. But Lee, let me point out what I think is going to be the big issues that are going to be in front of the legislature this coming session. I think the energy will probably be somewhere in 2 or 3 of the top 3. Number 1, I can almost guarantee it, is going to be a revisiting of the whole education thing, because the powers that be, the folks who are out there, did not get what they wanted. They wanted a significant increase in the base student allocation. We heard a lot of discussion about how education's been flat funded for years and children will die if we don't get, that kind of alarmism. And quite frankly, untruth, because the BSA has only had a slight increase since 2017, just a couple percentage points. But in those same 7 years, 5 of those same 7 years, they have had a minimum of $10 million paid over the cap, and this year is $170 million. So it was like 10 and 20, and then 50, and then 70, and then $170 million. We're paying a lot. The question becomes, education is obviously important, don't get me wrong, but how much is enough, especially for the product that's being delivered? We're still in the 48th, 49th percentile on reading and comprehension, and we went up from 48th to 46th on math, but we're still down at the bottom of the barrel. So how much is enough for the product that we're getting? Is there something else wrong here? And what are your thoughts on the increases to education, and where do we need to go?
Yeah, I actually had the opportunity to attend an educational seminar yesterday at Commonwealth North, and Dr. Deanna Bishop did a presentation on the BSA, and kind of how the funding situation works for all the schools. And it was very enlightening. You know, I'm a huge fan of growing vocational and trade education in schools. I think that's one of the ways that we kind of fail our students is it's not necessarily, are they doing well at these standardized tests, which those standardized tests have actually changed, I believe, something like 3 times in the last 10 years. So it's a little bit hard to gauge a baseline of what the actual performance is. But are they ready to be adults when they're 18? You know, are they ready to go to work? Are they ready to go to college? Those are the things that I'm really concerned about. And, you know, obviously, when it comes to funding, is it ever enough? And I think you always know the answer to that. You know, I could say as a business owner, am I ever paying my workers enough? Am I ever spending enough money on this thing or that thing? And the answer is, well, obviously no. I could always spend more. So, you know, it's really about sitting down when we get down there to Juneau and talking with school districts and finding out, okay, where is it that you are short? Where is it that you did need more funding? And you actually brought up kind of the spending beyond the BSA, but there was also a ton of federal money that came in through 2020 through 2022. Right. And that's also something that should be considered. You know, I do get that these one-time funding things or one-time funding allocations are problematic because it's hard to like gauge what your budget's going to be for the next couple of years. And that's real. I think the issue of having high teacher turnover and having, you know, open spots is real. That's a real problem. You know, good educators or experienced educators. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but let me ask you that because we had a conversation about this yesterday with Cliff Grow. My experience in business and in jobs that I've worked and in owning a business and things like that is that generally speaking, employees don't always leave because of pay. Pay is obviously a part of it, pay and benefits, but usually it's a culture issue more than anything else, right? If people love where they work and they love the culture and everything else, they'll stay. If they don't, if they're not heard, if they're not, you know, then I don't think this is strictly a pay or a benefits issue. I think there's something deeper in there that's causing some of these problems. And to your point of saying, are these kids ready to go, you know, to live life or to go to college? Well, obviously not, since 60% of the kids who go to UAA or UAF, 60% are having to take a remedial math course just to get into a 100 level class. I mean, that's something is broken there.
Yeah. No, I mean, totally. As 2 business owners, we can tell you that, you know, you can give your employees raises all day long, but if the workplace isn't positive, it's not worth it. And I think that's one thing I've heard from teachers that I've spoken with is, you know, they don't feel like they're treated like professionals. You know, and this is a real challenge too, is that when we have parents involved with students involved in the classroom, you know, our outcomes are better. Teachers feel more supported. So that's something that culturally we have to think about is how do we get more involved with our students' education? And I have to be careful about saying this because I don't have children. So it's easy for me to look at other people and say, hey, you need to get in there and be involved in your kids' education. But that's definitely something we need to consider is how do we have, you know, more community-based education going on? How do we get kids more engaged? You know, I kind of joke, but half joke that maybe I'll pass a bill to ban cell phones in classrooms. Like, but that's a real thing. That's a real issue. And a lot of parents I've talked to are like, please do.
No, it's a huge issue. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, that leads to my question, of course, about things like charter schools. I mean, charter schools or school choice, because if you're looking at class size and parent engagement, homeschooling is obviously the ultimate expression of that, right? Then you get down to maybe things like charter schools where parents are required to be involved because that's part of the whole charter school method. And yet it seems like with the good outcomes of charter schools and homeschools, those kids consistently perform better than the brick and mortar schools. Yet we still get this pushback, this massive pushback on this opportunity for school choice. And that kind of boggles my mind as well. Shouldn't we have the biggest option available? Shouldn't the competitive market of free ideas give parents the opportunity to choose where to put their kids?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's a really interesting philosophy. Like I am very supportive of charter schools. I think that, you know, the big debate this year was about, you know, the state determining whether a district has a new charter school or the district itself. And I'll tell you that I'm a real believer in federalism. Like, I really believe in local control. That's something I'm actually quite passionate about. So I'd say I'm a little bit hung up on that controversy as far as who should be determining whether a school district adds more. And so that was, the debate this year. But I'm a big supporter of charter schools. School choice, I think, is a little bit more challenging. And I think, across the country that has been, the states have been adapting that. We do run into the issue that we've got really small communities, right? We've got communities where we have barely enough students to operate a school. So is school choice going to be a realistic option for people in those communities? School choice could be something that we could take a look at for Anchorage, maybe Fairbanks, maybe the Kenai Peninsula, maybe the Valley. But realistically, statewide, I think we would have a really tough time making that a statewide program, just because of that. We have a very unique school system in the country. If Wyoming was able to do it, then we could look at that and say, oh, we could do it. So Wyoming's always the comparison state that I look at, like, how are they doing things? Because they have very similar issues, very similar economy. I think charter schools is definitely a bright future investment.
As a libertarian, I definitely feel what you're saying on the federalism issue of, local control. The problem that I see is that when local control has been subverted by the mechanisms of the education industry, and they don't want to put up charter schools because they're afraid of competition, that's part of the problem. When the power is entrenched in that way, sometimes you need an outside force to be able to say, yes, we can stand up another charter school because you guys don't want to have one because it would compete with what you're doing. So I'm with you. I want the local control, but when the local control is basically subverted everything, that's part of the problem. So it's definitely an interesting conversation. Backpack funding has been one of the discussions. And of course, the silver lining of COVID, if there's only really been two silver linings that I've really been able to glean out of COVID, one was the advent and the widespread acceptance of remote work. And the other one was, because let's face it, I've been doing it for years, and now all of a sudden it's mainstream, And the second part was, of course, that parents discovered that homeschooling was not as hard as they were told. They were told for years that, you don't have you don't have a degree, you can't do, it's so hard. And then they watched their kids on this all remote learning stuff and watching what the teachers were doing, and in some cases not doing. And they said, well, this is ridiculous. And of course, we've seen homeschooling across the country, just pop out and explode. So some kind of backpack funding where the funding follows the student. And even in areas where they are remote, they would still have options of, is there a boarding school, or is there some place where the kids can go that's a better option that can be funded by that kind of stuff? I think there are ways around that, but it is at least would give people a choice. And Donna Ardwin makes the point that most states have charter school authorizers that are not school districts. So while we do want the local control, we also don't want that to be a hindrance to the expansion. I got 2 minutes here left of this, and I want to finish up with education. Part of the problem in this state, and of course, part of this is a self-inflicted wound with COVID funds. We saw the Anchorage School District do this, where they were warned, they were told by the federal government, do not use this money in reoccurring costs. It's for one-time funding. Don't do it. And yet many school districts, including Anchorage, went ahead and did it. It was their poor planning on their part. As a business owner, again, you get a windfall. You don't create a bunch of programs and put a bunch of new hires on for, that you expect to keep for the next 10 years on a 1-year windfall. And that's what happened. And so it's kind of a self-made crisis in that regard. And I think that is a major part of this problem, is the lack of proper planning. And of course, then on top of that, you have this decline in enrollment, which continues. So fewer students, yet the administrative overhead continues to go up. Sarah Montalbano from the Policy Forum said in her studies, there are many districts now with 3, almost 4 administrators for every teacher. So the money is not really making it into the classroom. So how do you fix that? We got just 2 minutes here.
Well, that's the job of the legislature, right? Like, we need to go through and hold school districts accountable that they're spending the money in the right place. And I think, when you're sitting there in your office down there at the Capitol, folks come in to advocate for more education funding, the first question we should be asking is, how is that money being spent? I think that's a critical question. And again, during that seminar yesterday, we saw certain cases where, the school districts had massively increased administration costs. And certainly there may be a reason for that. There may be a purpose for that, but we need to be asking that question is, why did you invest all this money into this direction or this place? And that's the job we're supposed to be doing. We are the custodians of the state treasury, and we have a fiduciary duty to make sure that money's being spent wisely. So I think it's about not just kind of giving a pass, but always making sure we're asking questions and digging in and saying, if I can't have this information, if I can't see where you're spending it, then I can't support increasing education funding. This is why I think more business folks need to be in Juneau, because if one of my staff members came to me and suggested we spend, $15,000 on radio ads, I would say
yes immediately.
Yeah, obviously. I have to do this. I say, well, show me how this is going to make money. How is this going to be a return on our investment? How is this going to benefit us? And how does this actually reach, our consumer base or whatever? So same thing with the schools. If we're going to spend more money, then show me what it's going to. Show me how we're already using the money. And can't we just reallocate something from one area? And if we absolutely can't, and we've got to have this money, then I've got to know that it's being used correctly when we send it out. So it's about taking that time and having those conversations, not just rubber stamping everything, of course. That goes back to that's the easy thing to do.
Lee Ellis is our guest, candidate for House District 9. We're going to continue with him here in just a moment. One final segment dead ahead. We're going to talk about fiscal plans, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
I think that's part of the deeper problem here, Lee, is that, we have this entrenchment of the education industry in so many facets of this. There used to be a statute that said the majority of the BSA 70% of it had to be in the classroom. That's changed. That went away. So now we barely have 40 to 50%, but that's not even true because now they're counting things like IT support and other things as classroom expenditures. They're breaking up some of these administrative costs into the classroom. And we have this bulking up of kind of the bureaucracy. And we've seen it over and over and over again with the declining enrollment. So fewer students, but more money every year and more administration. It's, I'm not trying to be mean, but it's more like a jobs program than anything else instead of producing a good product, which is these kids. Right. And sure, there's components of parental involvement and other things that are important. Don't get me wrong. It's not a non-zero thing, but at the same time, you look at the mainstay is declining enrollment, increasing overhead, 53 districts, all with duplication of effort. Some districts with as few as 100 students in them. And you're like, couldn't we consolidate some of this? Couldn't we combine all these people into a group for healthcare? Couldn't we there's so many different things. And we watched, you're talking about accountability. Mike Shower tried to get an accountability measure in when he said, I will vote for this increase, but there has to be some accountability. And there was, we couldn't vote for that. That would account. No, we just want the money. And that's a tough situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, that's, again, I keep going back to it. This is why private sector folks, need to go get involved with the legislature, because to us, these are totally sensible things. Like, again, I have no problem investing in things in my business, but I just don't blindly do it. And it's not unfair to ask somebody, how is this investment going to be used? How are we going to be using this money? And what are we getting for it? What should we expect to see? And I think when folks talk about education, like, performance is number one. You know, if we're going to grow the economy in the state of Alaska, I tell people our metrics are awful. You know, you look at crime, you look at education, you look at all these different things. The only thing that's good up here is our per capita income. But you know, how much can you pay people to live in a place where their kids aren't going to get the kind of education they expect? So, you know, it's interesting to me because I'm originally from the Seattle area, and in the 1980s, Seattle was a dying city. And the reason why Seattle made a pretty amazing and astounding comeback was because it was a beautiful place to live. So we've got that. And they also had great schools that performed well, and affordable housing. Not anymore, but back then they did. And, you know, that's the thing, is that businesses will pop up and will start up in places where people want to live. And, you know, people want to live in places where they know their kids are going to get education. So performance to me is number one. So if we're going to talk about accountability, you know, let's just get right down to that kind of easy number as well. Then we've got to have better performance on reading. We've got to have better performance on math. We've got to have 18-year-olds who are ready to either go be an electrician or go be a college student, but not neither.
Right.
And that's to me, that's the focus. So when I look at accountability, it's a performance accountability is first and foremost. And I find that really drives people when you have an expectation, a clear expectation. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with you on that. We need to have a good expectation, and you know, maybe even if standardized testings aren't the answer, we know that when they can't even get into a basic math class, that's a huge problem. It shows that something is wrong, and that's been going on. I interviewed a guy from UAF 15 years ago who came on my program anonymously because he was part of the program teaching these kids, and he was so concerned about it, seeing these kids come out of high school completely unprepared. And he was sounding the alarm then 15 years ago. And so it's definitely a problem. And if we don't admit that there's something fundamentally broken or flawed in the education system, we're never going to fix it. Throwing more money at it is the definition of insanity at that point. We've got to find some way to make it happen. I want to talk a little bit about fiscal policy and a fiscal plan. You and I talked about that briefly at the beginning. It'd be nice if they had a 5-year plan. Forget about a 30-year plan. But, you know, we need to have something. And you do bring an interesting perspective to this as a business owner. And I think I agree with you. I think we need more business owners in there who understand that, you know, you can't just keep expending more than you bring in and expect that it's all going to be okay, because arithmetic don't lie, right? I mean, we just know that that's eventually going to happen. So I want to talk about that fiscal policy, and we're going to get into that. Lee Ellis is our guest, candidate for House District 9. We're going to continue on here in just a moment. I'm going to put in my vote for a really stinky double IPA. Make me a new one. I need one for the show. I need one for the show, right? The Michael Duke Show, smack you in the face IPA. That's what I need right there.
I think we could do that. I think the kids are all into these hazies. It's awful.
Oh man, we'll talk about it. It's awful. My wife is like, "You're drinking grass." I'm like, "Oh, it's so good." All right,
delicious,
here we go.
mighty grass.
Michael Duke Show.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. Lee Ellis is our guest, Republican candidate, House District 9. Lee, you and I were talking earlier about having a plan. It'd be nice if they had a 30-year plan. Then we said, no, maybe 10 or even 5. I mean, a 5-year plan would be a plus. The problem is we have no fiscal plan in this state. There's no long-term fiscal policy. I don't know if you've taken a gander at the governor's 10-year forecast for the last 4 years, but the 10-year forecast continues to predict out that within the next, over the next 10 years, we're in deficits based on current projections and what I would consider to be a very optimistic spend as far as, it's only going to be this much. And I think we know that it's going to be much higher than what they're projecting, but it's deficits for as far as the eye can see. And that essentially means that, they've taken the PFD. We're only left with 25%. That 25% will be consumed in the next, I'm saying 36 months will probably be consumed by the amount of spend that we have here. We had the Fiscal Policy Working Group. I don't know if you're familiar with their reports and what they put together. And we've had legislators that have been attempting to try and pull these separate pieces of the Fiscal Policy Working Group plan together, because that was a, bipartisan, bicameral, total opposites of the political fence, yet they all came together and unanimously said, this is what we need to do. And not a single component of that plan has been put forth, has come together and been passed by either body. The closest we got was the vote on HJR 7 on the floor. And then there was a spending cap that got submarined at the very last moment, and with a bunch of stuff added into it. So fiscal plan, what do we do for this fiscal plan? Have you seen the Fiscal Policy Working Group? Do you believe that is a good solution to this? Or, is it a Gary Stevens, our fiscal plan is 25-75? Which again is a doom loop. It's a self-licking ice cream cone. It's going to go away in 3 years. What do we do?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. No matter what fiscal plan we embark on, there's going to be backlash. There's always, it doesn't matter which direction we go. It's going to be unpopular. And I will tell you, it's been really interesting walking around and meeting with voters in District 9, because you'd be hard pressed to find 2 people living next door to each other who agree on what the fiscal plan should be. That's one of the important things you're going to do as a representative, right? And is you're going to walk around, you're going to talk to people on what they agree with. And I will tell you that people in this district, a lot of them are actually pretty okay with the PFD going away. But that's this district. When you're going to be a representative, you got to think about things in a statewide fashion. So, I do believe that we need to be adapting that fiscal plan the comprehensive fiscal plan to what we're doing in the future. I think that the problem is the state has lived forever on the resources that we have in the ground and going down the pipeline, and those resources are drying up. And we're going to have to start thinking about how we fund the government in the future. And I would love to believe that we could find $1.5 billion in cuts next year. But if anybody tells you that they're going to cut state spending by $1.5 billion next year and everyone's getting a full PFD, I would be very cautious about voting for an individual like that, because the likelihood of that occurring is probably zero. The bigger issue that I'm actually most worried about is how much of our state budget is made up of federal receipts. I believe this last year it was $3.8 billion of our total. I think, it's about 25% of our total state budget too. So we've got a federal government that's, pushing on a $35 trillion debt. Well, what happens when austerity comes from the federal government? That's a huge elephant in the room that I don't think a lot of folks have really considered as well. Like, at some point, the federal government, I hope, stops spending money or stops printing money and spending it like there's no tomorrow. And that's going to have a huge effect on the state. So, I think that
2 things will happen. Either austerity measures will have to come in. We will pull back from the fiscal cliff, or we'll go over it. Either one of those would mean a loss of federal funding in Alaska, where we have become a dependency state. We are so dependent on that federal dollars that it doesn't matter. And to your point about your constituents in your neighborhood saying, oh, the PFD going away is okay. The problem is that's a short-term solution, because, again, in about 3 years, when the PFD goes away, the appetite for spend and the trajectory of government spend is going to continue. So the next thing will be, oh, I'm sorry, suckers, free rides die hard. You guys should pay your fair share now, and there will be an institute of taxes. This dichotomy of PFD or taxes. First of all, the PFD cut is a tax. I mean, Matt Berman from UAA, the economist, he said, yeah, this is a tax. It's, it doesn't conform to a basic, but it is a tax. So we're already being taxed. And so it's not this question of tax or PFD. It's going to be tax and PFD, because once the PFD goes away and they take all that money, then they're going to add a tax on top of it, because they cannot control their spend.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why I am a Republican, because that's part of our job down there in Juneau, is to hold the line on spending, and we have to take that job seriously. I think one of my favorite quotes so far along the campaign trail, speaking with another Republican House member, and she said, our job is to say no. And she told me that she was speaking with one of her other colleagues in the House and said, it must be fun to always say yes. And they said, yes, it is. So, it's again, it goes back to bringing this private sector viewpoint into things. Like I have to say no at work a lot. I have to tell people no. And I never thought throughout my life that saying no was going to be, such an integral part of my life, but it's got to be now. And we've got to say no to certain things. But we also have to be open to the idea that we're going to have to come up with new revenue streams. That's just all there is to it. I tell people there's always that discussion of, if you don't have enough money to pay your bills in your house, of course you're going to make cuts, of course. But the other thing that I say is whenever I didn't have enough money to make rent or whatever, I went and got a second job. So,
Right.
It is about cutting the state or keeping spending in check. I do like the idea of spending caps and coming up with that. I had long discussions with my friend Senator Kaufman about that because he proposed one a few years ago. And I think that's an important part of it. But at some point, the oil revenue is going to dry up. The PFD is not going to be enough. The federal government may no longer produce receipts for us to continue spending on building beautiful roadways and all these other things that we spend it on. And we're going to have to take care of ourselves. And there will be a tax. And I wish it wasn't true. I wish that wasn't going to happen. And I would say in my district, people are much more amenable to a sales tax. As coming from District 9, which is the wealthiest, most well-educated district, when folks talk about an income tax, that is going to be a tax that is significantly imposed on my district, and that money is going to leave our district. And that doesn't always bode well with folks.
Well, and I think I wish we had time to talk about the difference between like a flat tax, a sales tax, some of these other things. I think they could all be, but we're down to the last 90 seconds or so here, Lee. So I want to give you a chance to give us your elevator pitch and how do folks find out more about you and what do we need to do? Go for it here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would definitely encourage folks in District 9 to look me up. My website is ellisforalaska.com. Please feel free to shoot me an email anytime. So ellisforalaska@gmail.com. I also have, the Facebooks, Lee Ellis for District 9. But yeah, I think experience is important. We have an open seat. We have 4 people running for it. And I am the only person in this district who has actually worked on legislation, who has been successful in moving legislation, who knows how things work down in Juneau and is effective at working at making policy happen. Our district has been challenged by having a different representative 3 times in the last 6 years. And I think we need a consistent leader that's going to bring results to our district and to the state.
Well, I can't wait to see what this next election brings. Lee Ellis. I just want him to make a beer that's somehow related to politics and elections now. Just something. Just
great idea. Yeah,
it's stinky and it'll be fun stuff. Lee Ellis, thanks for coming in with us. Hold the line here for just a second, folks. Hour 2 dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show. Alyse Galvin will be our guest. I'd like to take the last couple minutes here and just give you the final bite at the apple in case there was something we didn't hit on. A topic that you really wanted to drop in on or talk about, give you kind of the last word on that. I do have a question for you in regards to, but I'll let you finish your final thoughts here before I get to my final question. So one last bite at the apple here.
Oh, I think the biggest issue that's really facing the state right now, and another big issue, of course, we talked about the 2 biggies, but I think the third one is out-migration and lack of workforce. There's something like 12 to 14,000 open jobs in the state right now, and we've got to find a way to fill it. So looking at ways to make the state more competitive. And I think, energy and education both kind of fall into helping with that. But I have some ideas on how we can get there and help encourage folks to stop leaving and maybe consider coming here. So I think our economy would be booming right now if those jobs were filled.
Well, and as a business owner, this was my question, because what we've discovered really kind of seen is that there's this divorcement, there's this separation these days between the public and the private economy. In most states where the state is funded principally in taxation. They have to really keep an eye on what's happening in the private economy, because the private economy obviously is the funding mechanism that funds government. In the state of Alaska, we're the only state out of 50 that doesn't rely on the public economy to fund government. They're just so totally separate and divorced. We've had lawmakers that have literally said to other lawmakers, well, I mean, as long as the government, economy is doing well, the public sector is doing well, then everything's good. I mean, there's this divorcement. As a business owner, you understand that without that private economy, and if we have the government that keeps acting like it's all divorced, it's going to destroy the private economy, because there's just no incentive to keep it running or to make things better for average Alaskans, as long as the workers in the state and the workers for the local and the other governments are all okay, and whatever service industry services them are okay, then all the rest of it is just, okay. That's a problem.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm like super concerned about is, we hear the legislature talking a lot about how do we fill, all these unfilled jobs in state government. And I will tell you right now, the state government is actually failing to compete with the federal government. The federal government increased pay rates significantly in the last couple of years. And so a lot of folks are moving from the state over to the feds because they're paying better. They got better benefits, all these kind of things. And so now we're looking at state legislator who's focusing on how do we, improve recruitment for state jobs. And then now it makes it really hard for the private sector because we're all competing for the same dwindling workforce. And so that is definitely when people talk about how do we make the state more competitive to bring in state workers, my answer is we need to make the state more competitive to bring in all workers. So we need to think about broad programs that are conducive to getting everybody into every sector. That's the big issue. But nationally, we're running into this lack of workforce issue, and that's a whole nother question. But
part of the problem is we can't even. I mean, there was an attempt in the House to try, and in the Senate, to remove funded but unfilled positions, PCNs, right? That some of these positions have been empty. In fact, one or two of them have been empty since 2014. But a lot of them they've been empty for over 2 years, and they're like, "Oh no, that's not a problem." I mean, it's millions of dollars. That's in positions that were funded but not filled. We're still getting the job done. Some things like that you wouldn't do that as a private business owner. You wouldn't continue to put money into a budget for a position that doesn't exist, that you can't fill. I mean,
this is so far away from private industry. I mean, I obviously don't go, okay, well, we're going to allocate $60,000 to this job this year and then not hire for it. That's not even a thing. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to reduce state staffing just through some automation and improved interface with businesses and private citizens who have to interact with government. We've got a lot of positions in the state that definitely could be replaced by AI and automation and web-based services. And we just haven't really, done the technological advancement of our government enough to get there. But yeah, there's a lot of positions that could continue to be unfilled. But of course, when you're a state agency, you budget for it so that you get all the budget that you're looking for, or as much as you can. And then we get into the clawbacks and all that kind of stuff, where we go back through state agencies and claw back the cash that we've sent to them, and that's a whole nother process. But yeah, I think that's really taking a hard look about how do we get people to stay here? How do we get people to work here? What could, the future economy look like? And there's a ton of opportunity for that. And I think talking about taxes being divorced from the economy, that's definitely something I even talk about on my website. It's a huge issue.
Yeah, it is a huge issue.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting ready to ramp back up. I see that Alyse Galvin's in the green room. We're going to pull her in just a second to test her audio and everything. But Lee, I want to say thank you. I'm going to get you I have a T-shirt that says "Just say no to government dough." You keep saying you're Dr. No, right? So we'll get you one of those T-shirts.
We'll do a trade. I'll send you a Midnight Sun sweatshirt.
So. There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
All right, Lee. Well, thank you so much. That'll add to my collection. I already have 2 or 3, so I think we're good to go.
My man. Thanks for keeping me employed.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Lee, for coming on board. We appreciate that. Lee Ellis, our guest candidate for House District 9. All right, let me pull Alyse in real quick. We'll just test her audio and get things ready. We're about to restart the show. Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. I'm fine. Thanks. How are you doing?
We're doing good. All right. You're loud and proud. We're all good. Let me just turn
Great.
you down just a little bit there. Make sure we're good. All right. So we're about 40 seconds out from the start of the show, and we will pull you back in and get started here in just a minute.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks so much. So hold the line there. All right, folks, please like and share, like and follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube-y things and all that kind of stuff. The Michael Duke Show continues. Your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Here we go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find the audio-only live stream and links to our Facebook and YouTube and everywhere else where we simulcast the radio show each and every morning on the internet, as well as, of course, on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator live across the state of Alaska. It is the Michael Duke Show. Thanks for coming in and joining us. Hour 2 of the big radio broadcast. Today, we're continuing our discussion with candidates for office, both fresh candidates and candidates up for re-election. Today, we've got a good opportunity to talk with a candidate that we haven't had a chance really much to talk to, and that is Alyse Galvin, who is the representative from House District 14 in Anchorage. It should be a good conversation to kind of see, where we are at the state of the state and what she plans to do and what her focus is going to be on. We're going to continue these discussions, of course, all the way through the primary. Not that the primary really matters at this point. There's only 2 races in the whole state, in the Alaska legislature, rather, that are going to be affected by that because all the other races have 4 or less candidates. So all of those candidates are going to move right on to the general. It's more of a straw poll than anything else. And of course, the U.S. House race will impact that. But regardless, we're going to continue to interview these candidates as if they had to fight their way through that primary, because I think it's important to get as much information as we can early on and to know where the candidates stand and what they're talking about and what their philosophies are. So we're going to continue that here this morning. All right. So that means without further ado, let's jump on over to our guest, Alyse Galvin. She is sitting there in the green room drinking all my virtual coffee, and she's all of it. She's drinking. Don't drink it all. I need some of that stuff. She joins us this morning to talk about wood ticks, lunatics, and politics. I guess it's all there. So we're gonna get into it. Good morning. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Michael. Pleasure to be here. I know that my name has popped up quite a few times on your show, and yet I haven't had a chance to converse with you. So this is awesome.
It's good to talk. I've always said that, I'm never afraid to talk to people who I agree with or disagree with, because, the answer to speech you don't agree with is more speech, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. We need to be able to have conversations.
That's exactly right. So
right. Without tearing each other apart or doing anything else. So let's get into it. We know that, folks know Alyse and I are probably not going to agree on much today, but it's going to be interesting to get different perspectives, and we need to be able to do that. So let's start out with.
You might be surprised. There might be a few things we do agree with. If we don't actually have the conversation, we'll never get there. So let's.
No, I agree. It's always interesting what we find in common versus what we disagree with.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about this last session first of all. Let's give me a session recap. In your mind as you look back on this session, the things that were talked about. Obviously, education was a big deal. We talked a lot about energy in the South Central area. We talked about things like defined benefits. These were some of the big issues that came out. So give me your kind of report card and your report on this last session, what went right, what went wrong, and we'll start off from there.
Yeah, I would say the first thing that went right is we got a budget done on time. That's important. We can't get in there and not finish our job with that, right? That's the main job of the legislature. So grateful for that. Defined benefits never made it to the floor in the House. So on the House side, we never moved anything that I think would have much impact on better, let's say, impacting how attractive we are as a state. I think I heard you speaking with the candidate Ellis a moment ago, and we haven't impacted how we will be attractive either to future workers in our state government jobs. So that's everything from police officers, firefighters, teachers, etc. We didn't accomplish that. And then we also, so state benefits, like I said, I want to make sure that you're aware that did not get too much conversation. It was
Right.
sunk to the subcommittee. But we were able to come to some agreement around what we're going to do with PFG. We did not accomplish very much, in my opinion, around energy. Had a lot of conversations, though, and that was good. We were able to make sure that we get some of the federal funds there's some big investments coming in to basically make sure that we have a good system of which our energy can go through. And I'm grateful that we were able to get some matching funds for that. But, in the big picture, we still are struggling with education. We got some one-time funds. It's really a Band-Aid. We were not able to accomplish what we needed to accomplish in terms of getting long-term predictable funding for our schools. But I would say all in all, though, like I said, we got the job done. We came together in a bipartisan way on quite a few issues, and the governor disagreed on quite a bit of what we accomplished. That's what we did.
The education issue obviously was the one that sucked up pretty much all the oxygen in the room for the majority of the legislative session. And let me just say, the one thing that I found most irritating from my point of view was looking at all the reporting and the coverage and everything else, and this framing of the argument about how we've just flat funded education. We've just flat funded it. We've had now granted, the BSA has had only a slight increase since 2017. But that's just on the BSA. Of the 7 years since 2017, 5 of those 7 years we have included funding over and above the BSA with as little as 10 million all the way up to 170 million every year that has gone on there. So I just found that to be so frustrating watching it from the outside, because to me it was an improper framing of the argument. It is our second largest budget item. We spent over $2.2 billion on education in this state. And so the question is, how much, especially with a declining enrollment and I would say, inadequate scholastic achievement, how can we continue to justify the current expense? Do we need to not look at what's going on and say, is there something fundamentally broken in the education system as it's set up now that needs to change? Or do we just keep throwing more money at it? That's the big question there.
I think that's certainly the rhetoric that's gone around the town. I do think, just to be clear, if you're throwing the same amount of additional money every year, again, that is called flat funding. That means the schools have the same amount of dollars to work with, regardless of inflation. So
But that's not true. One year it was 10 million.
I'm trying to say that's the proof. That is the truth. And you can talk to your own school board members there in Fairbanks to get better clarity on that. This is a bipartisan kind of truism that people agree on. The BSA is per student. So when there are fewer students, of course, there is fewer dollars, and that scale down doesn't always compute. So that's why you in Fairbanks have had to close down schools. That's a really tough decision to make, but it has to be done. So there's some, this is just our reality. We have not been keeping up with the costs of education, just like if you had anything else you have to do as a service, whether it is firefighting and they need more equipment that is working, or they need to, either they need new equipment or fix their equipment, or they need to make sure that they are keeping up with what I would call the costs of living, right? So those firefighters would expect to have that. Things like healthcare were the largest drivers of costs, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. So people are wondering, why is it that it costs so much more to educate our kids from the 1980s? Come on, teaching is the same. Books are the same. Well, it turns out the cost of education is higher because the cost of healthcare is higher. And so anyone who owns a business gets this, right? They know that when they want to make sure that they keep their employees, they have to have some basic benefits.
Right.
And that's really what that's about.
Well, and again, I don't want to be too argumentative here, but the overage of the BSA spend over the 7-year period, I mean, 1 year it was 10 million, 1 year it was 50 million, 1 year it was 70 million. This last year is 170 million. And it's been a variety. So it's not like it's a consistent, we're not keeping up. They're always consistently paying over what the BSA is. And I'm not saying that the BSA shouldn't or should not be looked at and gone up, but it needs to be reactive. And you made a point as far as the decline in student enrollment. This is a continual projected decline in enrollment. And at some point, we have to start pulling in our horns. I mean, if we're looking at it from a business perspective, if I knew that my customer base was going down and down and down, I would start to shrink down the size of the organization to be able to accommodate that. And instead, it just seems like that doesn't happen. There's so much resistance to creating efficiencies, whether that's consolidation of school districts or share. Let me finish real quick. Consolidation of school districts or pooling healthcare costs or doing things, eliminating duplication of effort. I mean, those kind of things need to go on. And it seems like that's not the answer. The answer is, well, we just need more money to continue on as we are, even with a fewer number of students.
All right, Michael. So again, the BSA is where folks are using districts all over the state. So I'm not talking about just Anchorage. I heard this from 54 superintendents and others from those particular areas all over the state. The BSA dollars is what is used to hire teachers. Money on top of that is not a good idea to hire teachers because it is one-time funding. And you're saying, well, it was the same every year. Well, actually, that's not true. It wasn't the same every year. You just quoted yourself that it went anywhere from 10 million to 170 million. 174, I think, was last cycle. And the point of that is that that's still once a year. So those school boards would be very ineffective, and they would be irresponsible to be hiring teachers with those funds. So they're not, it's wasteful. I'll be honest with you. I don't think that's the right way to support schools. The legislature heard from districts all across the state, and it's not like one or two districts that are spending that are not spending properly. It's every district. So the legislature could not ignore that reality. Schools are failing our students. And when we talk about the number of students, I want to make sure we're aware. We were at 128,000 students at one point. This is statewide, and we've dropped about 5%. So not a whole lot there. I want to make sure that I know that you think about, we have so many fewer kids. Well, it's not that many fewer kids, but it is fewer kids. So let's make sure we get our facts right on that, and have a good conversation about what are we going to do to make sure these kids are successful, because that's the bottom line. That's why I'm here.
Well, and I didn't give a number, but it is a decline, and it's a continual projected decline, right? I mean, that's part of the problem. Is that we understand that it is coming.
COVID. It came down with COVID, right? We all are aware of that. And actually a lot of money got infused into private sector and public sector through COVID time. So it came down, and now it's actually coming back up, oddly. So the number of the kids in classroom matters, and also the high quality teachers matter. Those are the two things that I think about, is how many kids are in the class so that they can effectively be taught, especially when we have so many special needs and English as a second language and all these other complications in Anchorage. But also, can we make sure that we attract and then keep the really high quality teachers? Right now, in some districts, we've got half of the teachers not even from Alaska, but more importantly, not from America. And so there's some challenge. They're great teachers, but there are some challenges when English is a second language. And I want to make sure that Alaska does better than that. We're just better.
Alyse Galvin is our guest candidate for House. She's a representative for District 19, which is up in Midtown, or 14, I'm sorry, Midtown Anchorage. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the commercial break right now. So it's just you, me, and 60 of our closest friends on the internet right now talking about stuff. And I'll echo what Brian says, because he said, wait, if they aren't spending properly, why isn't the state legislature stepping in to fix that problem? And we did see that. Some of this is a crisis of their own making. The feds, when they dropped a lot of that COVID money, warned them not to spend it on reoccurring costs. This was a one-time payout. And yet many districts, including Anchorage, did just that. They shuffled money around and ended up spending that money on reoccurring costs. I mean, this is in some ways a self-inflicted wound. Do we reward that behavior, or do we force them to act more fiscally responsible in that regard?
Hey, I hear you, Michael. These schools are drowning. I hear you. That was, we all were wondering and questioning it, but I have not seen school districts this desperate ever. And I've been tracking education for at least 19 years now. As I said, it was inappropriate to use one-time funding for long-time hires. That's just inappropriate. The recurring costs are real. Inflation is real. And, if you're not sure about that, then go check your grocery bill and your heating bill. But this is what's happening in schools. And unfortunately, we have accommodated for other departments around inflation. And I sat in finance, so I watched, budget item after budget item be inclusive of changes in pay, changes in buying computers because of inflation or whatever. And that happened quite a lot. But when it comes to education, we have not been doing our job, unfortunately. And I think it hurts. I think that what I saw my firstborn kid get in his education system here in Anchorage in public schools was entirely different than what my fourth child got. And that's not right. We've got to do better. We've got to make sure these kids are getting what they need so they can enter the workforce and stay here in Alaska. So I'm all in for making sure that there's some accountability around that. Mind you, I want to make sure that we're doing it right. I do not believe that we are flooding our schools with all this money. It's ridiculous. They're not doing their jobs. That's not exactly true. And if you go into the schools, you'll see that's not true. There's some good work trying to happen, but the classes are too big, and we've got to do better.
The problem again also goes back to the administrative overhead. I mean, we talk about, you talked about this BSA is going to pay teacher salaries, yet there's no longer a statute. It used to be a statute that 70% of the BSA had to go into the classroom, and that's not there anymore. And we're seeing now that it's only between 41 and 50% of those BSA dollars that are actually going into the classroom. And that's not even actually factored properly, because they're counting things like IT support and some of these other more administrative tasks as classroom expenses. And so the problem is that we want a bigger BSA, but only a smaller portion of it is actually going to the teachers. Yet teachers, more teachers and better teachers are the argument for the BSA. That's kind of a dichotomous argument. I mean, how do you address that?
I think it's really important to clarify here. Sorry, but I have seen so many studies. Every single study I've seen, and they have to report how much goes into admin versus how much goes into classroom. Every single one has shown that admin has gone down drastically. So you need to look at those sources other than the Alaska Policy Forum. I'm sorry, it's just not true. And you can even call the state of Alaska Department of Education and ask them for so every district has to turn in their numbers. And I questioned this years ago because about 14 years ago, I went down to Juneau. I spent a lot of time advocating for schools as a mom. And there I found out this same rhetoric that you're hearing. So the rhetoric is, oh my gosh, if you just walk into those admin building, there's gold everywhere. They're stuffed with people. And that's where all the money is going. Well, we need fact-based decision-making around here, not based on philosophy, but on facts. And so I'm just trying to clear it up. Years ago, when I saw that, I came back to Anchorage and then spent 2 years in budget and audit meetings. Why?
All right, hold on. We're about to rejoin the radio here. Alyse Galvin is our guest. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Please like and share, like and follow, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show.
That's right, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska from my beautiful secret hidden location here in the Mat-Su. It is the Michael Duke Show. We're continuing now our conversations this morning with Alyse Galvin, representative from House District 14, running for re-election for this next session here in the Alaska legislature. We just finished up with education. I want to move on to discussions of budget and the PFD. Specifically, the PFD for the last 8 years, well, with the exception of this year, because education was the number one talking point, it seemed like, in the legislature this year. But prior to that, the PFD has been the wiffle ball that's been batted back and forth amongst the legislature and taken up all the time. We're down now to where we're receiving basically 25% of the earnings reserve monies that were dispersed, that are being dispersed. And we're seeing that a lot of pressure on that number. What's your thought on the PFD? What size should it be? Should it be the statutory formula? Should it be the 50-50 POMV draw that Hammond envisioned? Or should it be chosen each year by the legislature and used to offset some of those costs? What's your position on the PFD? And I'll have a follow-up when you're done answering that.
Yeah, you bet. Man, I tell you what, I've been sick and tired of that football going back and forth, and I've only been in for 2 years. We need a formula. We need it to be set in statute. We need to stop relying on PFD cuts to balance the budget. And I'm one of those who wants a larger PFD, but we need to figure out a broad-based revenue so that we can make this happen in a way that makes sense, and we can still get our streets plowed and feel safe in our homes. So I think that it does cost money to run a government. I get that. And I want to keep America and Alaska with these democratic values, but this PFD has really gotten in the way. We need something that's fair and that's moral.
And what do you foresee that being? What is fair and moral if the current formula is not good, or if 50% of the POMV is not good, or, I mean, what is fair and moral in your mind? What would be the solution to that?
Well, it sort of, and this is going to be frustrating to you because it's going to be a balance. That means there's got to be a conversation around this, that we agree that there's going to be something that's going to be allowing us to pay the bills, but also get some money in our pockets and generate some economy. So that number, I'm not going to give you a specific number because then, you're going to jump all over it. But I can tell you that it's got to be based on, we've got to make sure that we, whatever we do, we base it on the other revenue sources that we can generate. And there's really three main components around this that we normally get, right? It's oil, it's money from our PFD corpus, and then we have other taxes that pay into Alaska's revenue. And presently, it's about a third each. But the oil money is the easiest money for us to be able to get our hands on because it's actual cash that comes in every year. A lot of Alaskans don't understand this, but it is important that we have some kind of a structure in place that understands that this oil, which is up and down and up and down, not predictable, is something that we're not basing everything on. So I propose some sort of a income tax to protect the PFD amount by taking more from the high revenue Alaskans. That's something that I proposed. Alaska's not ready for that yet, obviously, right? We all hate taxes, but it's a conversation that I wanted to have because we were also having a conversation about sales taxes. So you out in Matsu, that's where you are right now. You already have sales tax. Anchorage doesn't, but many of the local communities use that sales tax to pay their local government services. So it's going to be tricky to add more sales tax on top of that. But income tax hasn't been touched. We used to have one a long, long, long time ago. And maybe we need to have that conversation so that we don't touch this PFD, which is driving me nuts too. It takes up a lot of time.
I'm noticing you're assuming a lot of things about me that I might be upset or I might run you down on something. And that, first of all, that's not what I do. First of all, second of all, you think you'd find it surprising that there are certain things that you and I might agree on. I agree that there's money left on the table in the oil taxation realm. I believe that there's $400 or $500 million that could be added to that without hurting the oil search and investment in the state of Alaska. And I think we do need to have a conversation about taxes. I'm not a fan of taxes. I think taxation is theft, trademark. But at the same time, we have to have that conversation because otherwise what will happen is we will end up in a crisis mode and then it will be a panic thing. And we know that under crisis and panic, no good decisions are ever made. And so we need to have the conversation now, and it should be, we should be looking at discussing things like a sales tax, a 2% sales tax, or a flat tax that taxes everyone equally instead of this disproportionate PFD tax that we're seeing now, where the lowest 80% are shouldering the major part of the burden as a percentage of income. Those are things that need to be talked about.
Yep,
So,
I agree. And nobody's a fan of taxes, but realists recognize that they're necessary for our collective benefit.
The main problem here is that as we look at the PFD as it sits right now, and based on the 10-year forecast, which I think in some ways the spending forecasts are pretty rosy, I think they're actually going to be higher than what's projected right now in the governor's 10-year forecast. But based on current consumption, 36 months, maybe 48, but probably closer to 36, the PFD will be consumed. All of it. It won't be a 75-25. It'll be 100% going to government spend. And the effect on the private economy in that, in so many ways, is so detrimental, whether it's people just paying their heating oil or somebody wanting to stand up a business and be an entrepreneur, or just to put the money back into the economy, to buy something from somebody else. That is a huge hit. And we've got to find a way to pull back on the government spending and find new revenue streams and do, again, the whole fiscal policy working group plan. We've got to get those pieces in place. And yet there seems to be no political will in the legislature to make that happen.
Well, you were talking to somebody who was willing to make it happen last session, right? That I was one of the few who did something to think about what are we going to do for revenue down the road. I understand that it's going to take 18 months to implement. So this is, if it could become imminent faster than a lot of folks know. I think we agree that we are blindly going down a track of cutting the PFD, whether we want to talk about it or not. And I agree with you that the PFD going away is a reality that we've got to face and fix. It's just something that we can't. It's irresponsible for us to not make these tough choices. And I think most people are just worried about not getting reelected. Well, go ahead, fire me. To me, if I can't stand on what I believe on in principles, then then don't vote for me. But I'm going to at least talk about what we need to do. Not everybody likes that, my conversations maybe aren't just right, but in terms of taxes, but it doesn't have to be exactly how, when you put in a bill, you put in an idea, and then idea then gets stirred around. That's the way it's supposed to happen. But instead, a lot of things this last year, when it was something like tax or something that nobody wanted to talk about because it's an election year, they didn't let those conversations keep going. So I'm sad about that. I think that it's time for us to make some tough choices and make sure that we're set up for Alaska's future, which is why I'm running, because there's just too much to fight for.
The Fiscal Policy Working Group did come up with a plan, and it was a multi-pronged approach. It was a bipartisan, bicameral committee, people who were on completely opposite ends of the political fence, but they all came together unanimously and said, these are the things we need to do. And not just, this is a list of things we need to do. These are things we need to do holistically. We need to do them all together. One and done is not going to work.
Exactly.
So a tax of some form of revenue, a cut to state government, an increase in the oil taxes, an enshrining of the PFD, a spending cap. Those were all parts and pieces of that 8 or 9 point plan. Are you in agreement with that? Were you in agreement?
I am.
Do you support that?
I am in agreement with it. Now, of course, it gets down to the nitty gritty of, which cuts and where and what cap and how are you going to show a cap, and all of that is complicated. But I am in agreement with the overall principles that came out of that working group a few years ago, and I think it's a shame that we haven't moved on it. I really do.
Well, and so then my question becomes, one of the components that did come out was the PFD protection in the Constitution of actually just enshrining a payment, not an amount, not a formula, but just enshrining a payment. And yet you voted against HJR 7 on the floor. Can you explain that vote to me?
Yeah, I can explain it, because that's one piece of it. And if you put that in place, especially the way the law was written, HJR was written, we would have had a big problem. We would have gone in debt even last year because it had the year before formula in HJR the way it was written. So that would have meant that it would have been a 3/4 amount of PFD, which we couldn't afford. So yeah, Michael, I mean, I had to vote no. I thought it was irresponsible.
Well, two things to that point. Two things to that point. One is that it was a vote that would have placed it before the vote of the people. It would not have enacted it immediately. So it would, that's the first part. Secondly, you can't take a constitutional amendment and you can't combine it with, it has to stand alone. So that would have been one of the pieces that would have to stand alone, but there should have been other things that came out. I agree. But you would have had to vote for that. And again, this wouldn't have impacted. And then the statutory formula that it referred to could be changed. You would have time. It still has to go before a vote of the people. So it still could be changed in time. So the idea that somehow it's going to reflect on an old statute, it would not be enacted for at least 2 years, right? Before it would be enacted. And you would have time to fix that statutory formula problem if it's something that you supported.
I hear you, Michael, but it really needs to be a good faith effort on all of the sides. And you can't ask for number one of the component and assume that the other ones are going to come. It's not a responsible way to handle it, especially given the makeup of the House at the time. I really think that it's wrong that you say, okay, let's pass this one component, but refuse to talk about the other components. And I can tell you right now, they were not going to move the other components. So if you're not sure about that, then maybe bring them on for that conversation.
Well, we talked with Ben Carpenter pretty exclusively about the things and pieces he was trying to bring out of the committee. This is not just a Republican versus Democrat thing or an independent versus Democrat thing. I mean, this is a bigger problem. Have you put forward or crafted any legislation to change the statutory formula to at least have a companion piece to that? Have you looked at that or done anything with that?
I worked that piece was already starting. And so I was working on the other pieces. Cliff Grow was working on a piece. I was working on the income piece, the revenue piece. So I worked on other components, but that's not to say that I wasn't supportive. I really think that somebody, and the governor would be a good one to do it, needs to put everybody in a room and say, you can't come out until you guys have this figured out. And you're going to have to all make tough decisions. And I will support the tough decisions that you all come together on. That is, I mean, we need the whole package. We don't, not just one piece of it. That's not a good idea. One piece at a time is going to sink Alaska.
Alyse Galvin is our guest. We're going to continue with her here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We'll be back one final segment dead ahead. We'll return with more right after this. Don't go anywhere.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Alyse Galvin is our guest on this. I mean, I guess I'm going to go back to HJR7 and beat that horse just a little bit more because, again, if that had passed, it would have forced a discussion on the statutory formula. And that would have made people come together to basically, have that discussion. And I don't think it's incumbent only on the majority to push these different components. I mean, why can't we have some kind of, bipartisan, bicameral or, bipartisan group of folks in the House that come together to say, these are the, this is what was all agreed on. We should all be working on these together. It seems like everybody's kind of working at odds on this. And I keep hearing the single subject rule being thrown around as one of the reasons why we can't talk. It seems counterintuitive to a lot of us looking at it from the outside.
You yourself it seemed very knowledgeable around the working group. And you yourself stated these should not be done one at a time. It comes down to whether you're willing to tie the state down to the railroad track and hope that the rational decisions come out of the folks who say that, they refuse to do it. I mean, this is what we're coming down to is that I appreciate your thoughts and you just want to get things started. But you've got to get them agreeing, firstly, that these pieces aren't going to come together in a vacuum because that is going to set the state up for failure. You can't give the recalcitrant measures what they or those particular members what they want, and then expect that they're going to play nice. That's just not. That's not a reasonable way to approach this. So I hear what you're saying. But again, it would not have been responsible for me to have voted for that. Not to say that in principle, I don't agree, especially if it's put together with other pieces. And I said that to Ben directly. Ben knows that. Ben was frustrated. So, my husband worked with Sarah Palin. He was the revenue commissioner. So he has thought a lot about these things, and he spent some time with me helping to educate me because initially, I'll tell you what, Michael, initially I was like, yeah, Ben, Ben and I met quite a few times individually because he and I both want to see the state make some tough decisions. We do. And if we don't agree on what exactly those decisions should be, but he seemed to be, he cares about the working group piece. He was just desperate and trying to get one thing done at a time. And yet he forgot that overall piece that was so important that you have to have more than one at the table. And my husband went through this with me, explained to me why it was irresponsible. And like I said to you, there just wasn't the other places in the other pieces were not in place. And it's not a matter of PFD policy. It's really an issue of negotiating. And it's about making sure that we have a process that at the end of the day gets Alaska what it needs.
We've been fighting for this for 3 years, right? 2021 was when the fiscal policy working group put it all together.
That's right.
The danger here is that we get so tied up in not doing anything that, again, 3 years, the PFD is going to be gone. And then what's going to happen is the legislature is going to come back individually or collectively, look somebody in the eye and say, well, free rides die hard. and now it's time for you to pay your fair share in taxes, because that's going to be the only solution. And at that point, it'll be a crisis, and so it'll probably be the worst form of tax that we could have, some kind of progressive deal or something like that, versus a sales tax or a flat tax that would hit everybody equally. But that's the danger. So what can you commit to make some kind of commitment to say, I will put together some kind of bipartisan parts, or put together an omnibus that covers the rest of this stuff?
Hey, you're asked, because I'm all about that. I will commit. I am so willing to help start that conversation. And if others are willing, absolutely, let's do it. Let me tell you a little bit of context, though, for last legislature. The last legislature, and you know a lot of these players, so it probably won't surprise you, we had a majority that was dependent on members that refused to consider other revenue. And you can talk to Ben about this. Rep Carpenter is very well aware of this. It was frustrating to him. They refused to consider any other revenue. That meant that we couldn't move on these issues. We just couldn't, to the extreme frustration of folks like Rep Carpenter and me. So I can tell you that I'm willing to take some bold moves to get us to get something done together. And yeah, I will commit to bringing up the working group piece over and over again, as I know others are willing. My whole coalition, in fact, was willing. We spent 2 half days on this as a coalition, trying to say, okay, well, what can we do to bring the others on board so that we can accomplish this? And we just didn't have any luck. We need a majority that's willing to take a hard look at these issues and make the tough calls for the benefit of Alaska and our future.
Alyse Galvin is our guest. We're about to rejoin one final segment dead ahead. Please like and share. You can like it or share it from any platform that you're watching on, Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. We return to the radio right now. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's do it. Here we go.
The Michael Dukes Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
All right, we're continuing right now. Alyse Galvin is our guest. We're talking about the state of the state, and we got one final segment here. We're going to give her a few minutes at the very end to make her final elevator pitch, etc. But before we get to that, we touched on it briefly early on. I said it was one of the big issues of the session, although it really didn't go anywhere in the House, and that was the defined benefits package that was passed out of the Senate. This is something that really concerns me about the future of the state, because we know that defined benefits across the country have been basically in a downward spiral. Many corporations, communities, governments, municipalities have eliminated defined benefits because of the uncertain nature of them. We know that our first go around with defined benefits has still left us. I mean, we currently still have a $7 billion unfunded liability for the remainder of the tier 1 through 3 employees that are on the docket. And now there's this proposal to have first responders and I guess teachers, and it will expand eventually out to every state employee at that point. Just as an issue of fairness, I see that happening. And yet we have people, Cliff Groh was on the program yesterday, and he said, he believed this would actually save us money, not be, not just revenue neutral, but it would save us money. Yet other estimates, including their own fiscal notes, say that, this is a multi-billion-dollar investment over the years. The Reason Foundation said it would cost upwards of $10 billion to make it happen. I'm very concerned about this. It would be nice if everybody had a defined benefits program, but as you pointed out earlier, one of the things that you can't predict is things like healthcare costs, and that's, of course, part of the main problem that we had with the original one is the runaway cost. That the problem with defined benefits is that you have no idea how to predict how much those benefits are going to cost 20 years from now, and that's part of the problem. What's your position on this defined benefits as it came out of the Senate, and what do you see? Are there any solutions to fix the concerns that we're talking about?
Yeah, I think this is a different defined benefits than the one you're thinking about. Let's be clear on that. The actuarials were wrong years ago, and that's what gets us tripped up. And so we did get in the tank, and we were in trouble because of a benefits package that we had years ago. And so tier 3 and tier 4, who are now in Alaska, they don't have anything near that package that, for example, the governor has. The governor has tier 1. So we are not in, we're not talking about apples and apples when we're talking about the bill that it was Republican Senator Kathy Giesel who put this one together. It is a much more refined benefit program, and it is because it makes you keep investing, makes individuals invest in it, that it's just there isn't the risk involved that was a problem before. So I want to make sure that we're clear about that. And if you need more facts, I honestly am not ready to prepare them, to give them to you. But I did see a very solid presentation on that. And you could get that from Senator Giesel. So I recommend you do that. It is entirely different than the previous package. And it really comes down to attracting folks that we are dependent on for a functioning society. Everything from police officers, firefighters, and teachers. And you're aware of that side of the conversation, right? So if we are not spending money on their overtime, on attracting them, we got huge hiring bonuses right now. And instead, if we're investing in this very, very modest defined benefits, the thinking is that we will be able to retain them and, of course, attract them. Since firefighters right now, they get trained up at an exorbitant cost, same with police officers. And then after about 10 years, when they figure out, oh, yeah, we're going to have to retire someday, they leave. After 5 or 10 years, we cannot afford that revolving door. It is high cost. So if you're looking at the bigger equation, I can understand how Cliff can maybe come to a space where this would be saving us. It certainly would be saving our state because we deserve better than what we've been doing right now. And we need to make sure to have these real resources for us. I don't know how it is up where you are, but I was raised here, and back in the day, not only did we not lock our doors, but when we called the cops because something was going on, anything, right? A strange sound or definitely a car getting stolen. There was a cop here within minutes. I can tell you that's not happening right now. Right now, what's happening is in Anchorage, we're 50 officers short. And so we'll place a call and they'll say, oh, please go online and report that, well, this happened to me last month. My wallet was stolen right under my nose. And no cop is coming. And the reason for all of this is not just defined benefits, but it is part of it. And so if we are the only state that when Senator Giesel presented this, we were the only state without an opportunity for a real retirement. So where am I with this? Absolutely, I support this. We need to come up with some sort of a program that works. I don't know if this is good enough to be competitive, but I sure hope it is. And is it a big risk? I don't think it's as scary as what you're talking about because I believe their numbers. They don't allow it to get more than 90% unfunded ever. And so that alone means it's not going to get us in the sort of trouble that you're talking about, your big, scary numbers of 7 billion. I'm sorry. That is just not where we're at. So I would highly recommend you and your listeners to have a chance to hear what this new program is about.
Two things. First of all, you said that the current first responders, law enforcement, you said they have a retirement. It's a retirement that many people in the private sector would be happy to have with a match. Now, I'm not saying that the defined contribution plan couldn't be increased. In fact, I think that was a suggestion also that Reason made, was that we could make it more competitive by increasing the defined contribution. Most people in the private sector would love that. That is a retirement. Is it as golden parachute-y as the defined benefits? Absolutely not. But even if you're factoring it at a 90% funding rate, as you said, the fact is you can't predict what it just means that in future years, we may end up all of a sudden having to fund more if we're guaranteed to hit that 90% and costs skyrocket beyond and we have no idea where costs are going, but costs could skyrocket. It still means we're on the hook for that. And even if it's not unfunded, even if it is fully funded, it still means more dollars out of the coffers in the long run. That's part of the problem. And
Well,
that's
listen,
part of the uncertainty
yeah.
of defined benefits.
Well, listen, it's portable. So most people want security when they think about retirement, right? And so we get folks who build up a portable portfolio, and then they move to a place that provides defined benefits. That's sort of what we have going on. And I hear what you're saying, that, well, the private would love to have that. Well, the private does have that in many different places. So it depends on where you're working, but the hospitals that you work at, oil and gas companies, I know that small businesses don't have it as much. We're in a horrible situation with regards to healthcare costs and such. But anyway, I mean, our current packages encourages what we've seen. That is our truism. We attract young folks, and guess what? They leave. So if you're not sure about those numbers, then maybe look that up. But it's a truism. About 30% of Anchorage folks between the ages of 18 and 40 are heading out of state. My own kids, I've lost 3 out of 4. And if you ask them about this stuff, they know it. And they'll tell me, Mom, we're in 2024 where you can go onto your computer and within 30 seconds know for your own field of work what sort of retirement opportunities are in different states. It's that easy, 30 seconds. So we got to get hip. We got to get with it. We're not with it.
All right. Alyse Galvin is our guest. We're down to the last 2.5 minutes here, so I want to give her a chance to make her elevator pitch, so to speak, on why folks should vote for her, and how do folks reach out and find out more about her, et cetera, et cetera. So, Alyse, I'll give you the floor, and you get a chance to summate and tell folks why they should vote for you.
Well, thanks so much, Michael. Yeah, I appreciate being here. I'm not sure how many listeners you have from Midtown Anchorage, but if they're out there, main thing is I'm open to conversations. I have every flavor of voter coming into my office all the time because I believe in these sorts of conversations where we think about the history of what's happened in our state and then think about what our options are for now, and make sure that we're looking ahead so that we set us up in a way where the next generation wants to live here. The main issues we've got to work on that I've heard from my constituents is we got to figure out what we're going to do with the rail belt and energy so that people aren't living with that uncertainty and concerned about the pricing changing drastically. We've got to work on education so that every child from cradle all the way to career is fully supported. We've got to make sure that we're building our workforce by way of working on our education piece. And most importantly, we need to appreciate that we're not all the same, that we need to come together into rooms and have conversations, real ones, in person. So I recommend that if you have any wonders about who I am, you could go onto my website. It's alaskansforalyse.com. And reach out to me anytime. I'm always available. I take text messages, calls, and requests for meetings all the time. So please do so. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you, Michael. And I look forward to more conversations.
Yeah, I think we should have some more conversations as we go through here, and maybe we'll pick specific topics, as we move forward on this. Again, Alyse Galvin, District 14, running for re-election in that district. You could find her at, again, alaskansforalyse.com. Folks, we're out of time for today. Tomorrow is Firearms Friday. Top Shot champion from the History Channel, Chris Chang, joins us. Willie Waffle as well. So make sure you join us tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., bright and early, across the state of Alaska. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. All right, Alyse, one final bite at the apple here. If there's something I didn't touch on, a topic we didn't discuss, or something you feel really strongly about that you want to sound off on, I'll give you the last couple minutes here.
Well, I don't think I can beat your sign off of be kind. I think that's really what it's all about. Let's be kind and listen to each other and make sure we appreciate the humanity in all of us. Oh, thank you very, very much, Michael. Really appreciate you. Thanks to
Well,
all the listeners too for caring.
Thanks for coming on. We'll have you on more often as we go through this thing. And if you succeed in reelection, we'll bring you back on during the session, hopefully to have some conversations about this. Like I said, we may not always agree,
Yeah.
but it is always good to have the conversations. That's the important part. So
Exactly.
thank you for being part of it today. We appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Okay, folks, that does it for today. We are going to continue tomorrow. I felt like I was being scolded half that time. Just like I didn't really know the numbers. I really didn't understand the stuff. I'm going to digest that for a while. We'll be back tomorrow, bright and early, 6 a.m. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Don't forget, you can always check us out on the Common Sense Corps if you want to help support the show. I thought it was just me. Brian says I was. I felt like I was being condescended to a few times there, but I mean in a polite way. But sure does make you think, huh? Anyway, it was good stuff. Appreciate you guys being part of it today. Let's start a conversation about this, says Rick. All right, Rick, we'll start a conversation about this. We'll have this next week. We got more coming up, and then, of course, tomorrow's Firearms Friday. Thank you, my friends. Ow. I don't know why that was there. Thanks so much for coming on board. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Bye.